At the start of 1951, Iran is undergoing a period of political and economic upheaval that largely goes unnoticed by much of the world. In the country, the monarchical system, represented by the Shah, coexists with a civilian government, and it is precisely at this intersection that a major change is taking place. At the end of April 1951, Mohammad Mosaddegh, a charismatic figure and trained jurist, is appointed as prime minister. This decision comes from a vote by the Majlis, the Iranian parliament, which includes many supporters of the National Front, a political movement founded to defend national interests and limit foreign interference. Mosaddegh, already recognized for his nationalist convictions, embodies the hope for greater economic and political sovereignty for Iran. He assumes power with an ambitious program, and almost immediately, he receives Majlis approval to nationalize the oil industry. This historic decision, made at the expense of the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, often referred to as AIOC, a British company that has controlled the extraction and sale of Iranian oil for years, reshapes the relationship between Iran and the United Kingdom. The nationalization law, supported by Iranian public opinion, endorses the government's refusal to maintain the concession system that guarantees the British company significant profits and leaves Iran with a limited share. It is based on the desire to reclaim all the profits generated by oil, which is then considered the country's main wealth. In Tehran, there is a strong emphasis on the aspiration to freely manage this strategic sector, essential for economic development and the modernization of the country. The repercussions of this approach are quickly observed. In direct response, London engages in a diplomatic, political, and economic confrontation. Tensions rise over the weeks as nationalization challenges the privileged status enjoyed by the United Kingdom in exploiting Iranian oil. From the British perspective, this challenge is seen as a major blow to its foreign policy and financial interests. For Iran, however, it is a decisive step toward independence, realizing long-standing demands that have become acute after World War II. The beginning of the Anglo-Iranian crisis is thus marked by the assertion of Iranian sovereignty in the face of the hegemony of a great colonial power, echoing other movements for economic liberation worldwide. In the months following nationalization, between 1951 and 1952, the pressure exerted by the United Kingdom continues to intensify. The British government, unwilling to lose its dominant position in the oil sector, adopts a series of economic sanctions aimed at suffocating the Iranian economy. Restrictions are imposed on the purchase of oil from Iran, and the revenues that Tehran might have expected significantly decrease. Deprived of export outlets, the Iranian state sees its finances weakened as the British company, officially supported by London, maneuvers to block any attempt to export the now nationalized oil. In parallel, subsequent documents and works suggest that the United Kingdom conducts a covert campaign to destabilize Mossadegh's government, seeking not only to discredit the prime minister, but also to rally Iranian political actors capable of exerting internal pressure. The nationalist circles, which had closed ranks at the time of nationalization, gradually begin to reveal their divergences. On the Iranian scene, the oil crisis weakens unity, as several institutions compete to influence the conduct of affairs. The Majlis, remaining very sensitive to public opinion, continues to support nationalization, but also expresses concern about the economic consequences of the standoff with London. The court, meaning the Shah and his entourage, is more cautious. While the sovereign affirms his attachment to national interests, he is also worried about the stability of his own regime and the threats to the state's economic survival. On their side, the army, whose command is closely linked to the Shah, maintains an ambivalent relationship with Mosaddegh. Some officers support the idea of strengthened sovereignty, while others worry about the financial deadlock. All these factors contribute to a climate where everyone wonders how far the government is prepared to go to resist British pressure. Debates within the National Front, the political coalition supporting Mosaddegh, intensify over the strategy to adopt. Should we continue to confront the United Kingdom directly, or consider a compromise? Religious circles, in particular, are sensitive to sovereignty issues as well as the balance of power between the Shah and the Prime Minister. This period is even more tense because Iran has already experienced in the first half of the 20th century, episodes of foreign domination and political instability marked by the establishment of authoritarian regimes. The memories of these events fuel mistrust of any external interference, but they also highlight the fragility of the country's democratic institutions. During this period from 1951 to 1952, the economy suffered considerably from the inability to sell oil on international markets, and Mossadegh's government had to cope with dramatically reduced fiscal revenues. Moreover, negotiations with the British remained stalled, with each side digging in its heels. London demanded to retain a significant share, which Tehran deemed unacceptable. At the same time, Iranian diplomats explored other avenues, hoping that the intervention of a third power or the mediation of international organizations might help resolve the crisis. Nevertheless, on the ground, the stalemate seemed total, and economic difficulties fueled a climate of anger and incomprehension. In July 1952, the situation reached a new peak as a regime crisis emerged openly. Mossadegh, faced with persistent blockages, sought to obtain emergency powers to reorganize the administration and act more effectively in the context of countering foreign interference. He believed that without enhanced authority, his government could not face the multiple crises: economic disorganization, threats of internal subversion, international pressures. However, the issue of emergency powers was delicate in a political system oscillating between constitutional monarchy and the aspiration for a more advanced parliamentary democracy. Many influential figures, including within the National Front itself, were reluctant to grant such powers to the Prime Minister. Some feared that too strong a concentration of authority in his hands would end up eroding parliamentary gains and create a dangerous precedent for the country's political life. Others opposed Mossadegh's decisions regarding the choice of ministers and high officials, whom they considered too radical or insufficiently conciliatory towards the Shah. Conservative religious leaders, who had initially supported the nationalist movement, began to voice doubts about the government's direction, feeling that it was straying from the moderation expected in a country with a deep-rooted Islamic tradition. Moreover, a part of the National Front became divided over priorities. Some favored direct confrontation with the United Kingdom, others wanted more pragmatic negotiations, while still others worried about the growing influence of leftist forces and the Tudeh Party, the Iranian Communist Party, which, in the atmosphere of the Cold War, aroused suspicion among many national and foreign political actors. The July 1952 crisis became concrete when Mossadegh, for leverage, tendered his resignation. This act, intended to demonstrate that he was indispensable to the country for defending the nationalization, provoked a strong reaction in the streets. Large demonstrations demanded his return to power, as many Iranians perceived him as the main bulwark against capitulation to the United Kingdom. Ultimately, Mossadegh returned, but the rift within the nationalist camp was now evident. Disagreements over the conduct of affairs only deepened. The issue of appointments to key positions, the management of the armed forces, and Mossadegh's approach to the Shah's role were at the center of debates. The Prime Minister remained popular, but he was increasingly politically isolated. Critics poured in regarding how he governed, and the coalition that had brought him to power was dangerously fracturing. Iranian newspapers, censored more or less strictly depending on the era, echoed the rivalries between political figures. Tensions also grew between supporters of the Shah, who favored a rebalancing of power, and those who believed the sovereign should be content with a symbolic role and let Mossadegh decide on crucial issues. At the beginning of 1953, this unresolved political crisis was compounded by a new element. In the context of the Cold War, Iran found itself caught in the rivalry between the West, led by the United States, and the Soviet Union. Governments in Washington and London fear that Iranian instability will benefit the Tudeh Party, considered close to Moscow, or that the USSR will seek to extend its influence in the region. American diplomatic archives later consulted reveal the recurring fear of Iran slipping into the communist sphere, which would give the USSR access to strategic oil resources and disrupt the regional balance. In this climate of suspicion, Washington worries about Mossadegh, despite his nationalist and non-communist leanings, maintaining tactical relations with certain left-wing figures simply to strengthen his base, or at least to preserve some political cohesion against the common enemy that is the United Kingdom. American diplomats are also aware that the ongoing oil standoff jeopardizes Iran's financial stability, which could exacerbate social unrest and create fertile ground for revolutionary ideas. Consequently, the United States, initially hesitant, gradually aligns more closely with the British position, considering that it might be necessary to mount a covert operation to overthrow Mosaddegh if he proves incapable or unwilling to make compromises that would ensure the preservation of Western interests. Discussions between American and British officials multiply in the months leading up to spring 1953. In Washington, the perspective shifts from a cautious approach of observing the situation's evolution to a logic where it becomes conceivable to act to install a government deemed more compliant and more favorable to the preservation of a petroleum partnership offering more guarantees. The State Department, the CIA, and their British counterparts, including the Secret Intelligence Service, begin to exchange ideas on a possible operation. In this context, the fear of Soviet expansion serves as a major justification for planning a covert intervention. Documents later revealed, in the form of telegrams, memorandums, and meeting reports, clearly show that in the spring and summer of 1953, the two countries coordinated their efforts to develop this famous covert operation, known under the codename TP-AJ-AX. For the British government, the priority remains to regain control of the oil sector, or, at the very least, to minimize the loss of its interests. For the Americans, it is mainly about preventing a possible rapprochement between Iran and the Soviet Union, while taking British concerns into account. Behind the scenes, negotiations continue, while on the ground, the political crisis in Iran shows no sign of easing. Mosaddegh remains determined to uphold nationalization, while trying to explain to the population the economic constraints burdening the country. Budget shortages nonetheless increase discontent, and pressure mounts against the prime minister, even within his own camp. Demonstrations follow one after another, sometimes in support of Mosaddegh, sometimes to denounce the deteriorating living conditions. The prospect of free elections or democratic reforms appears increasingly unclear, and the various political actors navigate between nationalist idealism and extremely challenging financial realities. The British, who have maintained an unofficial oil blockade, strive to intensify the liquidity crisis to convince the Iranian public of Mossadegh's failure. On their part, the Americans, who possess significant influence on the international stage, vacillate between negotiation and clandestine action. But the fears related to Soviet bloc expansion gradually push them to consider the latter option. In Western chanceries, every development in the Majlis is closely monitored. Every fragile agreement made or broken around the prime minister, every sign of approach or tension between Mosaddegh and the Shah. Intelligence services refine their understanding of the local political landscape, identify potential interlocutors willing to collaborate, and question how to legitimize a government overthrow if it were to happen. In both London and Washington, the idea grows that a new, more compliant leadership could bring Iran back into a sphere favorable to major Western powers, blocking any attempt at Soviet influence. Decision-makers then designate General Fazlollah Zahedi as the ideal replacement figure. A former Minister of the Interior and high-ranking army officer, he presents a profile combining authoritative presence and connections with certain conservative Iranian circles. Analyses contained in documents from the era emphasize his reputation as a staunch opponent of Mosaddegh and his ability to forge ties with security forces. Several planners consider that Zahedi, as a former national gendarme, is more likely to gain the trust of the military hierarchy than a traditional civilian politician. Behind the scenes, figures hostile to Mosaddegh are already rallying to this perspective, believing that only a firm general can restore order. But the situation remains fragile, as it is difficult to measure the reception such a replacement would receive among the urban population and the Majlis. However, the memo writers bet on the weariness caused by the oil deadlock, economic degradation, and growing political tensions. Zahedi's allies suggest that he prudently go underground when the decisive moment nears, to avoid his arrest by the police still controlled by Mossadegh's cabinet. During this period, correspondences report discreet meetings in private apartments in Tehran or isolated villas on the outskirts, where army officers, notables, and intelligence agents strive to refine the plan. Roles need to be distributed, determining who will contact army units favorable to Zaheidi, which religious or political figures must be convinced, and how to organize propaganda to legitimize the future government. These negotiations emphasize the need for constitutional cover. American officials, aware of the symbolic importance of the Shah in Iran, want to ensure that the act of overthrowing Mossadegh will take on a legal form. Although the monarch had so far remained aloof and even wary of such a risky undertaking, he is made to understand that the Iranian constitution theoretically allows the sovereign to dismiss a prime minister by royal decree. The official texts, known as firmans, thus become a crucial strategic tool. Operation Teepajax is preparing to leverage two key documents, one notifying Mossadegh's dismissal, and the other appointing Zaheidi as the new head of government. In the timeline of August 1953, these decrees are to be signed by the Shah at the seaside resort of Ramsar, where he is staying to remain away from the capital's turmoil, then secretly transmitted to Tehran. The planners rely on the complicity of carefully selected officers, including Colonel Nematollah Nasiri, who then commands the Imperial Guard. Nasiri is considered a trusted man, likely to travel by night to present the documents at the critical moment. He thus becomes a central figure, the material bearer of the Shah's orders. At the same time, an intense political war unfolds in the streets of Tehran and the corridors of power. Allies of the forthcoming secret operation fuel a propaganda campaign aimed at discrediting Mossadegh among various factions of society. In markets and cafes, certain rumors spread, accusing the prime minister of undermining the monarchy, pushing Iran towards economic chaos, or even dangerously aligning with the communist Tudeh. Newspapers and leaflets, whose reliability is sometimes questionable, amplify these themes, while influential religious leaders, courted by intermediaries, suggest that Mossadegh is no longer fit to govern. Documentations cited by Encyclopedia Britannica and other archives report that clandestine funding fuels these disinformation operations, allowing payment for speakers, leaflet publishers, and groups of demonstrators ready to publicly denounce the cabinet's policies. In the shadows, Western emissaries undertake to explain to Zahedi's potential backers that the coup will lift economic sanctions imposed by the British, and that Iran's economy can only restart by breaking away from the radical nationalist line. Confidential notes show that everything is orchestrated to turn part of public opinion against Mossadegh, while giving the appearance of a spontaneous and patriotic movement. At the heart of Tehran, support networks for the new plan are quietly taking shape. According to several accounts, religious leaders, sometimes hostile to communist influence and concerned for the place of religion in the Iranian state, agree to frown at the mention of Mossadegh if promised a return to a more traditional order. Politicians, worn out by incessant struggles in the Majlis, feel that, without strong action, the country is sinking into instability. Senior officers, anticipating a possible realignment, make contact with emissaries of the secret operation to express their willingness to support a new government. The architects of TPAJAX use these predispositions to weave a web of alliances. They also seek to contain the influence of the Tudeh, the Iranian Communist Party, which is experiencing a resurgence of activity in unions and popular neighborhoods. Rooted in the Cold War, Western logic wants to prevent any communist surge, and the coup supporters know that the official position of the United States guarantees them certain support if they promise to counter Soviet advancement. In this tense climate, the coordinating role assumed by Kermit Roosevelt Jr., a CIA agent, is solidified. Traces left in archives and journalistic accounts indicate he operates in Iran while maintaining a low profile, using pseudonyms and intermediaries to avoid drawing attention. He is in direct communication with Washington, regularly sending coded cables to report on the moods of Iranian society, the reliability of local support, and the level of control Mossadegh exerts over institutions. It is reported that he has a confidential budget allowing him to bribe officials, fund propaganda, and financially support key elements preparing the ground for the coup. His actions are part of an already existing history of CIA secret interventions, but the scale of Operation Teepee makes it exceptional. Meta, pause, sex, 3.0. Indications suggest Roosevelt spends part of his time in secure houses, sometimes protected by armed civilians or police units bought to the cause, and that he meticulously coordinates the passage of information between Shah supporters and those who support Zahedi. His links with influential personalities allow him to disseminate, at the opportune moment, rallying cries and signals on a large scale. Over the weeks of the summer of 1953, pressure mounts. Discussions between British and American officials intensify, and each side hopes that the series of orchestrated actions will weaken Mosaddegh to the point of triggering a near-spontaneous uprising. Internal records mention significant coordination with street leaders specialized in organizing demonstrations, often paid to mobilize crowds in record time. On their side, supporters of the Prime Minister still present a certain strength. Pro-government newspapers and nationalist militants denounce these manipulation attempts and continue to praise the country's hard-won independence through the nationalization of oil. However, shortages and economic crisis cause discouragement among the population, and Mossadegh's supporters do not know what level of firmness to employ to curb the revolt. The Shah's ambiguities complicate the situation, as he hesitates between his desire to maintain his status as a constitutional monarch and the temptation to renounce an elected government that confronts him directly. During this period, Zahedi, potentially exposed to arrest or conspiracy charges, prepares behind the scenes. According to various reports, he frequently changes hiding places or moves at night to escape the eyes and ears of teams loyal to Mosaddegh. He makes contact with officers he deems loyal, and through emissaries, he reassures the country's influential figures of his commitment to preserve the monarchy. He is careful not to give the impression of a mere military takeover. Indeed, the Shah's support remains an essential asset to validate his accession to the position of Prime Minister. The few political testaments he circulates suggest he will restore order and reopen discussions on oil revenues, without specifying which concessions he actually plans to make to foreigners. This vagueness allows him to maintain the adherence of moderate nationalist groups while preserving the promising support of Westerners. In this atmosphere of tension, clandestine meetings multiply in Tehran. Informants watch for any suspicious movements in the capital, as the slightest arrest of a conspirator could unravel the enterprise. Planners receive conflicting advice. Some fear that the army will ultimately remain neutral in a political standoff, while others anticipate that military units will side with the action, especially if they receive assurance of royal approval. The telegrams preserved at the office of the historian show how every detail matters. The exact time at which Nasiri must present the firman, the route he will take to avoid patrols loyal to Mosaddegh, the Shah's fallback location in the event of failure. Discussions focus on the necessity of organizing contingencies if the first attempt fails, and they even plan to deploy other generals depending on the circumstances. Participants in these meetings also assess the probable strength of reactions from supporters of the Tudeh, considered capable of mobilizing large worker crowds if the army takes to the streets. During the spring and summer of 1953, the public remains largely unaware of the scope of what is unfolding behind the scenes. The Mosaddegh government remains focused on current affairs, the attempt to maintain oil sovereignty, and the daily challenges caused by the commercial isolation imposed by the United Kingdom. Yet, the atmosphere in Tehran indicates that something is brewing. Whispers abound that notables await the outcome of a crucial step. Opposition figures are seen meeting at late hours, and there are occasional talks of money being distributed to pro-monarchist demonstrators. Simultaneously, a segment of the press linked to nationalists denounces these intrigues but often struggles to clearly prove foreign involvement. Witnesses of the time describe a sort of muted tension permeating conversations, as political passions are intensified and the prospect of confrontation seems plausible. Standing in the corridors of power, it is clear that the stakes of signing the firmans are considerable. The Shah, still hesitant, receives emissaries tasked with reassuring him. He is guaranteed that once the decree is promulgated, a vast popular movement will legitimize Mossadegh's ousting in the name of constitutional right. The monarch's cautious instincts are explained by his experience. He knows that past failures have demonstrated the strength of Iranian nationalism, and he fears finding himself at odds if the operation fails. Nevertheless, Western strategists present the plan to him as well-crafted, emphasizing that American and British diplomacy are determined to see this scenario succeed. In Homs, nobody yet guesses that these dealings will culminate in a vivid event, marked by the army's intervention, orchestrated parades in the streets, and a sudden takeover of the capital's strategic points. The night of August 15, 1953, the atmosphere in Tehran is tense and uncertain. Colonel Nematollah Nasiri, a member of the Imperial Guard, discreetly leaves the palace to meet with Prime Minister Mohammad Mosaddegh. In his hands, he holds a firman signed by the Shah, a document meant to revoke Mosaddegh from his position and appoint General Fazlollah Zahedi as head of the government. However, when Nasiri presents this text, he is met with an immediate reaction from forces loyal to the Prime Minister. Mosaddegh, informed of the maneuver, orders Nasiri's arrest as he is about to officially deliver the letter. Troops loyal to the Prime Minister surround the area, preventing any further action and seizing the initiative. Before monarchist supporters can organize, news spreads that the plot to dislodge Mosaddegh has failed. From the early hours of August 16th, local radios report the incident and assert that the coup attempt has been foiled. The government, now convinced it has uncovered a serious conspiracy, publicly communicates about this failure. The Shah, aware that his role is now exposed, chooses to quickly leave the Ramsar region where he was. He flies to Baghdad, leaving behind a deeply divided political power and a population caught in turmoil. On the morning of August 17th, Tehran awakes to a climate of confusion. Mosaddegh, now aware of the extent of the plot against him, seeks to strengthen his authority. Yet, the absence of the Shah from the country raises a fundamental question. Does the heir to the throne, having left so hastily, still have constitutional legitimacy while outside Iran? Throughout the city, the population debates the crisis born from the vacancy of monarchic power. Newspapers, mostly government-friendly, publish articles questioning the validity of royal decrees, no longer defended by the sovereign. Meanwhile, supporters of the Iranian left, particularly those of the Tudeh party, intensify their activity in the streets. They organize rallies against the monarchy, destroy symbols embodying the royal presence, and encourage a popular movement aiming to consolidate the positions of the prime minister. We see the formation of processions chanting anti-Shah slogans, while some more cautious groups advocate for a compromise that would preserve a constitutional structure without completely breaking with the court. Political negotiations are underway behind the scenes to consider the possible creation of a regency council tasked with fulfilling royal functions in the absence of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Government officials, worried about the scale of the demonstrations, hesitate on the strategy to adopt. The police initially try to control the crowd, but quickly find themselves overwhelmed, as the discontent is not limited to an isolated group. A whole segment of society, exasperated by instability and economic crisis, mobilizes and demands radical changes. In this context, the executive power seeks to maintain relative cohesion, but cracks appear even within the nationalist camp, where there is fear that continued unrest could further weaken the country and create opportunities for foreign intervention. On the morning of August 19th, everything suddenly shifts. Pro-Shah groups, until then relatively discreet, begin to march through the capital. Vehicles circulate through the streets, carrying supporters brandishing portraits of the sovereign and calling for the return of the monarchy. The police, seemingly instructed not to interfere, stand at a distance and allow the processions to grow, while opponents of the prime minister try to rally as much support as possible. Mossadegh's supporters, surprised by the rapid rise of this movement, struggle to organize and respond. As the hours go by, tensions intensify. There are attacks on political offices and newspapers reputed to be close to the government, and clashes erupt in several districts. Gradually, military units, perhaps feeling closer to the court than to Mosaddegh, refuse to disperse the crowd, and even allow some demonstrators to enter public buildings. This growing passivity on the part of law enforcement accelerates the mobilization of pro-Shah activists, who gain in confidence and numbers. In cafes, markets, and gathering places, uncertainty reigns. No one really knows if Mosaddegh will be able to withstand this wave, which, in just a few hours, seems on the brink of overwhelming his government. The balance of power, previously favorable to the Prime Minister, is shifting, and everyone understands that the fate of the country is being decided on this decisive day. In the early afternoon, a group of soldiers and civilians supporting the Shah heads toward the radio station, a strategic location for broadcasting political messages. The guards, supposed to protect the building, withdraw or join the demonstrators, allowing the putschists to occupy the premises with little resistance. Quickly, they take control of the technical facilities and interrupt the usual programming. To the astonishment of listeners, a voice announces on the air that a royal decree now appoints Fazlollah Zahidi as Prime Minister and declares that Mosaddegh is dismissed. The broadcasting of this message overturns the situation. It gives the crowd the impression that a form of monarchical legality is once again at play, justified by the Shah's written act. Meanwhile, Zahidi, ready to assume power, is already publishing his government program, promising to restore order and unity in the country under royal authority. Listeners, surprised by this announcement, concretely witness Mossadegh's sidelining and understand that the street is no longer the only battleground. The symbolic support of the radio confers a form of legitimacy to the monarchist faction, which is gradually imposing itself to the detriment of the current cabinet. By the evening of August 19, the situation definitively turns in favor of the Shah's supporters. With the multiplication of pro-monarchy gatherings, Mossadegh's team finds itself isolated. His headquarters is besieged, and residences associated with his government are attacked. The Prime Minister's own home is targeted. Angry groups set it on fire, symbolizing the abrupt fall of someone who, a few days ago, still seemed firmly in place. Mosaddegh manages to temporarily escape, but is quickly placed under arrest. Key members of his cabinet, as well as some of his political supporters, are apprehended. In the hours that follow, General Zahidi, supported by the military and the implicit recognition of part of the population, organizes to form a new government. On August 22nd, the Shah, who has learned of the unexpected success of the second coup, makes his triumphant return to Tehran. He is greeted by cheers from a crowd that, within a few days, has shifted from hostility towards the sovereign to proclaimed support on the airwaves. This event marks the end of Mossadegh's government and the beginning of a consolidated regime, in which Zahidi now occupies a dominant position, while the Shah regains power strengthened by the symbolic victory and the collapse of his political rival. The period following Mossadegh's arrest is marked by judicial repression. The new authorities, eager to punish the former prime minister and deter his supporters, set up a military tribunal to try him for high treason. Mosaddegh, once hailed as a national hero for nationalizing the oil industry, finds himself sitting on the bench of the accused, in a room where the tension is palpable. The debates drag on, but the outcome seems predictable. The tribunal declares him guilty and imposes a prison sentence, followed by house arrest. Other political figures linked to his government face similar trials. This wave of repression aims to destabilize the nationalist network and definitively undermine Mossadegh's influence. In the last months of 1953, the press, now closely monitored by security services, pays little attention to internal criticism, while official propaganda emphasizes the return to order and the necessity of fully restoring the Shah's authority. Opponents, often silenced, fear that a new climate of self-censorship will become entrenched in Iranian political life.